Welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, and if you're watching on our YouTube channel, Tar Heel Illustrated, I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as they usually do, THI publisher Andrew Jones and THI football recruiting director Deana King. Guys, it's an exciting day. This is the first installment of our THI football preview podcast. We're going to be doing it about midweek ahead of every game during the football season over the course of the next few months. So be looking forward to that. We're going to have guys from different outlets coming on as well and talking about their team. And today we've got Ryan Murray from Cuse Confidential coming on in just 10, 15 minutes or so. So really exciting episode for you guys, and looking forward to diving in to Carolina's season opening opponent in Syracuse. Obviously that game, a noon game in Chapel Hill on Saturday, September 12th. Guys, first thing we're going to touch on, the spread. It started off at 17.5. It's now moved to 22.5. What that shows me is there's a lot of outside confidence, a lot of high expectations for what this Carolina team can do. It also shows me that there's a lot of people out there that aren't very confident in what Syracuse can do. I know last week they were also picked to finish second to last in the ACC, guys. But AJ, we'll start with you. Is that confidence warranted for this Carolina team? And is Syracuse as bad as we think? Because Mac Brown said earlier today, actually, that he didn't think they are.
Well, you're never going to hear a coach say that the team they're playing that week is bad.
Exactly.
The great Brett Friedlander told me one time that he was on a conference call with Lou Holtz when he was at Notre Dame. They were number one. They were playing like with 1-7 Navy that week. And Holtz went into this tirade about why they need to be prepared for Navy. He started listing off all these battles that the Navy had been involved in and won over the course of time, like from World War II and stuff. And so coaches are going to say that. But, you know, I think Mac's right. It's an opener, so you got to be concerned because it's an opener. And there are elements to Syracuse's team, which I think Carolina fans need to be focused on. We'll hit on Tommy DeVito here in a few minutes. But I think the reason this thing has moved, and I'm not a point spread guy, so we're not doing point spread stuff. But we found out on Tuesday when Syracuse announced that a few players had opted out. Two of them were their top two projected running backs, Abdul Adams being one. So that, I think, was probably one of the issues. And I think you're right. I think the more people, start to, chew on all these potential contenders in each of the conferences, the better Carolina looks. More and more people are thinking, wow, this club can get to Charlotte. Some think they're a dark horse to maybe do something nationally. They've got a guy being mentioned for the Heisman Trophy. They've got, when PFF puts out all these tweets about these guys that were top 5 in the nation a year ago in this stat category and that stat category, often a Tar Heel is in there. So I think a lot of it has to do more with the Carolina optimism that people have and the expectations than it does Syracuse. And I don't think Syracuse is, I think they're, 14th in the media picks?
Yep.
That's probably accurate. I don't think they're a very good team or should be a very good team, but that doesn't mean that they can't come in and win this game. And they've got a quarterback who can win. Like I said, we'll hit on that in a few minutes. So point spreads are point spreads, man. They're not actually meant for anything other than people to wager cash and bookies to make bucks.
Exactly. Not too much to look into on that. Dino, what's your thought? Do you think Carolina's a 3 touchdown or more favored over Syracuse? Do you think that's accurate? Do you think Carolina's that much better than the Orange?
If Carolina plays like they're capable of, yeah, I believe it is very capable of doing that. But like AJ said, Syracuse has some missing parts. Also, they're going to be missing one of their best linebackers that's coming in too. So I think that spread possibly is correct, and there is a lot of optimism for UNC. Nothing against Syracuse, but there is. I mean, when you have Sam Howell and the weapons that he has around him, it should be pretty interesting for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, definitely. That offense is loaded, and there's definitely potential for Carolina to put some big points on a Syracuse defense that has a lot of question marks about it entering the season. Guys, let's talk a little bit about Syracuse last year. 5-7 overall, 2-6 in the ACC. Those losses weren't great. Those wins weren't great. Wins over Liberty, Western Michigan, Holy Cross, Duke, Wake Forest. That Wake Forest win was pretty good to end the season. But besides that, I mean, I know Syracuse last year also entered the season in the top 25. AJ, I think Dino Babers has been there now for about 5 years. They've had one good year, which we're going to touch on that year a little bit when we talk about Carolina's game against them in the Carrier Dome here in a second. But Syracuse just not coming off a good year, and they've also, which we'll touch on when we talk to Ryan here in a little bit, they've also lost a good amount of guys too. So just a lot of question marks for this Syracuse team, and I think you can easily see why they were picked to finish second to last in the ACC when you look at how they did last year overall.
Yeah, but this time of year, everybody's optimistic. Everybody's confident. They have a new defensive coordinator, so they think they've cleaned up a lot of what went wrong on that side of the ball last year, and they had some terribly ugly performances on defense. So they think they've gotten a little bit of that straightened out. And their last time on the field, they beat a team that Carolina lost to. So look, nobody thought Carolina a year ago was going to be as competitive as the Tar Heels were. Some people thought maybe they could get to a bowl game, not in the manner that they did, losing 6 games by a total of 24 points. So you never really know. There's always a couple of teams every year in every conference that don't get talked about much at all in August, and they end up being much, much better. And there's always a couple of teams that people think, wow, that's a really good club, and they end up not being very good. You go look at the preseason top 25 the last 25 years, and I guarantee you there's a couple of teams in there every year, well, I almost guarantee it, every year that don't even finish with winning records, even though they're preseason top 25. Stuff happens, and openers happen. So Syracuse, on paper, should not win this game, and it shouldn't be super competitive, but it's an opener, and crazy things happen.
Yeah, Dina, can you touch on that a little bit? Like I said, Syracuse just not coming off a great year last year in terms of wins. But, I mean, 5-7 is not great. You're not going bowling. But, I mean, we've seen Carolina in the past 5 years have a lot worse seasons than that. So what are your thoughts on how Syracuse finished last year, and how do you think that may translate to this year, if at all?
Well, they do have some key parts coming back, and we'll get into that more in depth. But when you got a quarterback like DeVito, who he was among the nation's leaders in passes thrown without interceptions. I think he had like 170 straight heading in, and only 2 guys ahead of him was Trevor Lawrence and Bo Nix. So that's a pretty good figure for him. And they have a very good defensive back in Andre Cisco, who returns. He's one of the top leading interception guys, and he's also a preseason All-American by several things. So Syracuse can be dangerous, and Mac specifically said, you know, they can't take anybody lightly. They can take one game at a time. His team can't say, oh, so-and-so says this. They got to go out there and play Carolina football. If they do that, I think they shouldn't have many problems. And
they got to come out of the gate doing that.
Yeah.
When you have an underdog, especially when there's the atmosphere is going to be weird. There's so many strange things going on. The last thing you need to do is give an underdog confidence. Carolina's got to come out and they got to push hard, push right at them. A club that thinks they might be better, but they don't know if they're better. If you can get into their heads early in the game, then you could squash them psychologically. And I think Carolina needs to get out to a really good start in this game. And by the way, Tommy DeVito, who you're talking about, 63% completion percentage, 19 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, in a situation where, you know, his team needed his arm in a lot of games to be competitive. So he threw a lot of important passes last year, and only 5 times was picked. So that's pretty impressive.
That was a great assist by you guys, too, for my segue for the last point before we bring Ryan in.
Point to the passer, wherever
exactly,
he is.
Point to the passer, as Roy would say. But talking about that game, AJ, I know you were there a couple years ago with Larry Fedore's last year. Obviously, Carolina went up to the Carrier Dome. And, I mean, we can say whatever you want about the game and how poor that team was, but Carolina should have won that game and had a lot of opportunities late to do so. I think that Carl Tucker drop stands out in my head the most. AJ, you were in the Carrier Dome for that game. I think it's also safe to say that Tommy DeVito came in, gave him life, and was probably the reason they ended up winning that game ultimately, besides a few Carolina mistakes. But just what do you remember about that game and kind of being there? What was it like to see that, and also touch a little bit on Tommy DeVito, because as you mentioned, he's a starting quarterback still here.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was more than safe to say he did. I mean, he came in the fourth quarter and threw for 3 touchdowns and 181 yards. He lit up Carolina's defense. They had no answers for him. Mm-hmm. And Syracuse was flat that game. They didn't have a great crowd. The atmosphere was not. I mean, Carolina was struggling. The Tar Heels played really well that day. It was one of their better performances of the season. Daz Newsome had a punt return for a touchdown in that game. And the Tar Heels were in position to win. But DeVito came in, and Eric Dungy was a really good player. One of my favorite players to watch in college football for a couple of years, was struggling. They brought in DeVito, and he lit him up, and Tar Heels lost in overtime. And what I remember, what I wrote about a lot after that game and asked Larry about afterward, was kind of how they lost. And Syracuse deserves all the credit for winning that game, but, man, Carolina got that turnover, and they had the ball at the 39-yard line inside the last minute and a half, 2 minutes or whatever, and they throw the ball. I mean, Nathan Elliott struggled throwing the ball downfield. Everybody that followed Carolina remembers that. And they throw long or something. They should have just – they had a really good kicker in Weiler, just run, position to kick a field goal. The game was tied at the time. Get a win and get out of there.
Yep.
They didn't do it. I mean, so much went wrong for that team that year, and that was, of course, how all that happened. The Carl Tucker miss, the botched handling of after getting that turnover, and the fact that they couldn't cover DeVito. And Jordan Tucker told us yesterday or a couple days ago that, yeah, a lot of guys in the team, currently on the team, were there in the Carry Dome, and they remember that. And that was for in a year where you go 2-9, how many bitter losses can you actually have where you leave the end of the season, you still taste that game? That's one that they tasted, and I think a lot of them still taste it.
For sure.
And DeVito, by the way, really good player, a gritty quarterback who can use his legs a lot, got a good arm. He could throw moving. The defense, Carol's defense is going to have eyes on him all the time. He can beat you in a number of ways. For
sure. One quick thing I want to ask Dino before we go over to Ryan. Dino, Mac Brown even touched about it in his press conference Wednesday after practice, but Syracuse has a lot of guys from North Carolina. Is there anybody on the Syracuse roster that you remember from your time? Obviously, you're a recruiting expert that maybe Carolina should be wary of or watch out for.
Yeah, there's a couple of guys that are actually projected to be starting Saturday against Tar Heels. One name, Stephen Thompson, the linebacker. He was on the Vance State Championship with 2021 commit Power Eccles. So that's a dynamic duo that led Vance to a state championship. He's on the team. He's a projected starter. Also, Garrett Williams, who is out of Hickory Ridge in Harrisburg. He is projected to be one of the defensive backs. So 2 projected starters for North Carolina, and another linebacker that's probably going to be in the rotation is Lee Kapodka out of Parkland High School in Winston-Salem, who had a great career there for the Mustangs. So, yeah, I'm anxious to see how some of the North Carolina high schoolers do, because Syracuse has had some success recruiting in North Carolina. They're having to replace their leading rusher from last year, Mo Neal, who was out of Forest View in Gastonia. So, like I said, I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, those North Carolina connections make things even a little bit more interesting ahead of the game. But that's it for us right now. We're going to switch over and talk to Ryan Murray from Cuse Confidential here for a little bit, and here's what he had to say.
All right, let's go ahead and welcome in Ryan Murray from Cuse Confidential. He covers the Orange, football, basketball, and recruiting. Go to CuseConfidential.com and check out all of his stuff. Ryan, welcome aboard, man. Good to have you on.
Yeah, it's great to be with you guys. Let's talk some football.
Absolutely. Real football, actual games, not if there's going to be games. And I guess I'll start with that. I know that Syracuse had to pause a few times, and some of that, I guess, was the players' decisions. There were some concerns about some of the testing. Why don't you kind of fill in some of the gaps there about what happened, especially early in camp with the Orange, when it seemed like they were kind of intermittently practicing for a couple of weeks?
Yeah, what happened was the football players just wanted to be on the same page with Syracuse and the rest of the ACC and Liberty as well, because they're the out-of-conference opponent. The testing at Syracuse has been really they've done a great job at Syracuse as far as the testing goes. They saw that Liberty wasn't testing as much, so they wanted to pause and talk about that. They wanted to pause and just talk about the whole ACC in general. Once they got their questions answered, they were back out on the field. So it was just making sure that all the right procedures are being taken in this time. And, everybody's got questions. And this virus can, attack in different ways, and everybody kind of gets it, so differently, so to speak. So It's just all just being on the same page, and that's all they really wanted to do was just focus on themselves, what everybody else is doing, and what they're doing.
UNC had to pause for several days a couple of weeks ago, about 2.5 weeks ago, and then once they returned and the school said, okay, you can resume activities, they haven't had any issues at all. They've gotten into a routine. How long has Syracuse been in a routine, and did the Orange eventually get in the same number of practices in camp and preseason that they would have had in a normal year?
The Orange really, when it comes to like stopping practice and everything like that, and their numbers, Dino Babers said they'd be in the top 4 if there was a Final Four for overall testing. So they've been really on top of that. As far as practices, information is just very limited coming out, but it sounds like they're right there. They might have missed 1 or 2, but with the information that comes out of practice and what Dino's saying in his press conferences, it's hard to get a good gauge on where SU's at. But from everything that I've seen, heard, and talked to, it seems like Syracuse is right there. They're ready to go. Injuries are a bit of a problem, but as far as practicing, they've got the practices in, and like I said, they're ready to go.
From the outside looking in, the book on Syracuse is, well, new defensive coordinator, because they were really struggling on that side of the ball. So it's kind of a wait and see how things are with that group. Really good quarterback who can do a lot of different things to beat you, but a lot of questions otherwise. Having a couple of kids that they announced yesterday that opted out, including top 2 projected running backs, kind of from a guy that's around the program a lot, is that image of Syracuse this year, the perception that this is going to be a club that's going to struggle. They have so many question marks, and kind of where do you start as far as fixing those question marks? Is that kind of the narrative close to the program?
I mean, yeah, I would say that there's question marks, and people are kind of waiting for Syracuse to break through. With their offense transitioning from Eric Dungy to Tommy DeVito, Abdul Adams and Jarvion Howard leaving, that's really going to hurt their run game. But their offense as a whole should be right there. They got a lot of returning offensive linemen. They might struggle this week because they are dealing with injuries, but when they are healthy, they're going to have a good line up front. Taj Harris returns on the outside, who's a big play receiver. They've got Nike Johnson, who's another big play receiver on the inside. And then when you look at their defense, there might be a couple questions about linebacker, but up front on the defensive line and in the defensive backfield, there's a lot of playmakers. And it starts with Andre Sisco, and there's Trill Williams and Iffy Melifanu. There's a lot of guys that have had a lot of game time. So there's just a lot of questions surrounding that that linebacker core. And now, how's the running game going to be? Because last year, Tommy DeVito got sacked a lot. So if he doesn't have a run game to rely on, what's it going to be like when he goes back to pass? Is that defense going to pin their ears back and just go after him? So there's questions about the overall play right now. And as far as the offensive line, the running backs go, that we'll wait to see Saturday how it's going to play out, because again, nobody's seen practice this year or anything like that. So there are questions, and the seat might get a little hot for Dino Babers if the questions don't get answered this season.
Yeah, I want to ask you about Dino Babers after this question. Going back to Tommy DeVito, I was in the Carrier Dome. I covered that game a couple years ago when he saved Syracuse that day. That was not a very good performance by the Orange. It was a rare, decent to good performance by that Carolina team. And Tommy DeVito came in 181 yards, 3 TDs. It came in the fourth quarter. That's the only time I've seen him in person. So tell Carolina fans who saw that game what it is about him that makes him such a solid quarterback and a guy that doesn't throw many interceptions.
It's all about what's between the ears with Tommy DeVito. He's a very smart player. He's been a smart player going through high school, through his time at Syracuse. It's really just been about those reps that he was able to take sitting behind Eric Dungy. He takes everything in like a sponge, and he gets out there and plays. Now, when you go back to that game when he came in relief, that's when Syracuse had a perfect depth room. They had Eric Dungy, they had Tommy DeVito, they had Chance Amy, Rex Culpepper. They had a full room of Division I solid quarterbacks. Then you go to last year, and it was Tommy DeVito, and then walk on. Rex Culpepper was there and then walk on. So he was able to have a competition week in, week out, day in, day out. He missed that last year. He's got it a little bit this year. So if he's getting pushed a little bit, plus what's going on, and like I said, in between those years, he's just a very cerebral player. You can make all the plays. There's not a throw on the field that Tommy DeVito can't make. And it's just learning the offense. Now he's 4 years into it. And right now, as long as that offensive line can hold, Tommy DeVito could be ready for a breakout season.
And how badly does Dino Babers need that breakout season? Because you kind of alluded to a minute ago, I don't know if he's on a hot seat, but I would say the seat might be a little bit warm right now, because the only really good year he's had was that team a couple of years ago. As we like to joke about down here, they barely even beat that Carolina team.
Yeah, like I said, the seats probably it's warming up. He's got that 10-3 season, and that kind of everything just clicked that year. They didn't have a lot of injuries. You had a great college quarterback in Eric Dungy, who was able to put a team on his back. I think this year you've got kind of a veteran offensive line. You've got your quarterback that you groomed for this job. You've got weapons on the outside. Yes, you're hurting at the running back spot, but you do have a dynamic running back in Jawar Jordan. Yes, he's a redshirt freshman, but he can still make some plays. He's got one of the deepest defensive backfields probably in the ACC. So there's the pieces on the field that Dino needs to take that step forward. If Dino doesn't take the step forward with all the weapons that he does have at his disposal, then next year the seat's going to get a little hotter, and then Syracuse all of a sudden is back into, do we still have Dino Babers as a coach, or are we going back into the ranks of we're looking for a coach? This year's going to be very interesting in Syracuse, New York.
One other quick thing before we let you go, the Carrier Dome. The Carrier Dome has changed. I guess they put a new roof on. I was in there, I guess it was March 1st or February, the last day of February when Carolina was up there in basketball. And everyone said that they were going to start working like the next day, I guess, on the new Carrier Dome. Have you had a chance to go in there or be by there? And how is it going to be different? I know this game isn't being played up there. I'm just curious because the Carrier Dome, you know, is such a cool place. I'm just curious kind of how different and special it's going to be now.
They're going to have a hard top roof. The dome is going to be deflated, and they're going to have a hard top on it. There's going to be air conditioning in the dome now.
Yes.
It's going to be, you know, going towards your state-of-the-art facilities. But, yeah, the Carrier Dome, as people once knew it, is not going to be that place anymore. It's a little, you know, you're a little bummed, but you're at the same time you're seeing what's happening with the future. And as far as driving by it and everything, it looks really nice. They haven't got the roof on complete yet, which, you know, they better hurry up because they got a couple weeks to go.
Yeah.
But it's almost there, and it's going to look really nice.
Well, bad media take here. I just hope that the press room for basketball games is better. It's not the visitors' locker room for football, I guess.
I think I've heard some stories about that from you, AJ.
Yeah, and the tables they're using there are about 30 years old. But it's still such a great place to go see a game. If anybody ever gets a chance, they got to go up there because I imagine it'll be even better now.
Absolutely.
The press room's going to still be that football locker room. The press room for football, you know, it leaves a lot to be desired. Some of the chairs that you sit on in that football press box are not very comfortable. I mean, they are actually the same ones you sit on for basketball. So there you know what you're dealing with. But when a Syracuse game lasts about 4 hours, those chairs really, you know, you really get to meet your wallet, so to speak, if you're sitting up there.
People love hearing sports writers complain, right? Hey, Ryan, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you doing so. If you guys want to check out more about Syracuse, go to QsConfidential.com and check out all of Ryan's awesome work he's got going on that site.
Awesome stuff there from Ryan from Q's Confidential. Really appreciate him coming on and taking some time out of his busy day to preview Syracuse ahead of Saturday's game. AJ, after talking to Ryan, how are you feeling about Carolina's chances in that game, and what's just your overall thoughts on Carolina's season opener now?
Well, I'm glad to hear that Syracuse got a lot of that stuff straightened out, and he doesn't have access to practice. We haven't had access to practice either. I think we probably get a little more information than they're giving out up there at Syracuse. But and coaches who are going on warm seats usually don't give out much. They always recoil. They always pull back, as we saw from Mr. Fedora a couple of years ago. But I'm glad to know that at least they've gotten into a routine and they know who they are. They know the guys that are going to play and the ones that have opted out. And they've been able to get a couple of weeks of steam going into the season. I want every program to be in that situation because this has been such a different and unique time for everybody. And I do think it's interesting. You know, I love talking to people who cover other teams because you always learn something. I'm not going to learn much just Googling stuff. And I don't know his program, the Syracuse program, like he does because he covers it. I do think that there are parts. And as openers go, you got to be ready and you got to play well. And I think one of the primary challenges for the Tar Heels is be ready. And they used that home crowd last year a lot to fuel them. They're not going to have that Saturday. They're going to have to generate their own energy. That's why I think it's really important early to get on them quickly, get a little bit of a cushion, get into their heads and make them think, yeah, well, I guess we are 3-point underdogs in this game for a reason. On the flip side, if they don't have great energy and they make a few mistakes and there's a botch situation in the special teams and next thing you know, you're 10-10 at halftime, it's not a good situation to be in because that's how underdogs win games. When the team that's favored doesn't dot enough I's or cross enough T's. So have a lot of energy, dot your I's, cross your T's, and don't make big mistakes that cost you on the scoreboard. That has to be Carolina's mission going in because I think Syracuse, they're an ACC team. Dino Babers is a good coach, like Max said. They got some guys. This isn't a gimme just yet. We may get into the fourth quarter and think, yeah, I guess it was a gimme. Or they get in the fourth quarter and say, see, they didn't do this, this, and this.
Yeah, it's first game of the season, too. A lot of that stuff, preseason hype and everything, can kind of go out the window because you just never know how things are going to unfold on game day, especially in that first game of the season. AJ, before I let you go, just how excited are you to finally get back in Kenan Stadium and watch some sports in person for the first time in a long time?
This is the longest stretch. It's been – you and I went to Chapel Hill that Monday after the basketball season ended, and we shot a bunch of videos around campus and stuff.
Haven't been back since, yeah.
I have not been back since. It's the longest period I've been where I have not covered an event of some kind. The loss to Syracuse in the ACC tournament to this coming weekend against Syracuse in football. So that's the longest it's gone for me since I got into this business almost 25 years ago. So I'm excited. I want to feel normal. We all want to feel normal. We all have different things that help us feel normal. For me, being in a press box, covering a game, doing what my passion drives me to do is a big part of that. So I'm excited for me. I'm excited for the people who subscribe to this site, the people who watch our videos, because this stuff matters to them. And there was a real genuine concern and even a fear by some people that they would not play. Mac even told us Wednesday that the one day that he was in doubt was the day that the Big Ten and Pac-12 announced they were not going to play. So if you go to where my sense of comfort was at that time, you could ask my wife, I wasn't very positive. I was down.
Yeah.
You know, this for me, I need this. I need to do this for a living. I love doing this. I need to be at these games. I need to write these stories. I love these teams that you don't know what's going to happen. I like to be surprised when you go to games and when you see a season play out because it's part of what fuels me. So I'm very excited to feel normal. And I know a lot of the fans are. I know the kids are. I'm really happy for these kids. They put in so much time and work. The average person has no clue. And not to dismiss that. They just have no clue what these guys put in them. So I'm happy for the seniors. They get to run out of the tunnel. They get to play a game. They get to have their season. I'm happy for the coaches. I'm just happy. We're going to have a football game, Jacob.
It does feel good, doesn't it, AJ? I'm really looking forward to seeing some football finally played in Kenan Stadium on Saturday as well. But that's going to do it for us in the first ever episode of the THI Football Preview Podcast. Really enjoyed having Deana and Ryan on here as well. But if you've enjoyed this video, be sure to like it, be sure to share, and also be sure to subscribe to Tar Heel Illustrated. For just $8.33 a month, you get continuous coverage of Carolina football, basketball, and recruiting. So be sure to head on over to TarHeelIllustrated.com.
And let me add one thing real fast.
Hold in there.
A very unconventional butt-in here on my part. Our staff picks will be on the site. We're not doing predictions in these podcasts. Our staff picks will be on the site, posted every Friday, the day before a game in football and in basketball. It's usually the day of a game. So go to our site, check out our staff picks. You can see where I'm wrong and see where Jacob's right.
Absolutely. I got to bounce back after last year's basketball season, AJ. I was a horrendous record in last year's prediction. So.
Well, it was just kind of part and parcel of what was going on in Chapel Hill now, right?
Exactly. What can you do about it? But that's going to do it for us, AJ. Really enjoyed it. And for everybody that's watched, we appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.